beginning of recorded history, and for thousands upon thousands of years, cultures across the entire world all believed the Earth was flat. Their various cosmologies and cosmogonies differed in slight ways, but their overall geographies and astronomies were incredibly consistent and in fact virtually identical. The Earth was a stationary plane, void of any motion or curvature, flat across its entire expanse, except of course for hills, mountains, and valleys. The North Pole was the magnetic monopole center point of the flat Earth, with Polaris, the North Pole star, situated directly above. Polaris was the only motionless star in the heavens, with all the other constellations revolving perfect circles over the Earth every night. The stars were divided into two categories, known as the fixed stars and the wandering stars. The fixed stars were so called because they were observed then, as we can observe today, to stay fixed in their constellation patterns night after night, year after year, century after century, never changing their relative position. The wandering stars, what are today referred to as planets, were so called because they were observed then, as we can observe today, to wander the heavens, taking their own unique spirograph-like patterns, making both forward and retrograde motions over and around the Earth during their cycles. The Sun and Moon were both of equal size, and they too revolved over and around the motionless Earth, as immortalized in the Chinese yin-yang symbol. The Sun and Moon were much closer to Earth than supposed nowadays, and each shined with their own unique opposite lights, the Sun's being warm, golden, drying, preservative, and antiseptic, and the Moon's light being cold, silver, damp, putrefying, and septic. The Sun and Moon, as though connected to a magnetic maypole, made alternating spiral journeys over and around the Earth every year. The Sun began its journey at the Tropic of Capricorn at the winter solstice, where it made its fastest and largest circle over the Earth. For the next 3 months, every day the Sun slightly narrowed its path and slowed its speed until by the spring equinox the Sun had spiraled its way from the Tropic of Capricorn to the equator. Then for the next 3 months, again every day, the Sun continued to slightly narrow its path and slow its speed until the summer solstice, when the Sun made its smallest, slowest circle around the Tropic of Cancer. Once the Sun reached this innermost circle, like the ribbons and dancers around the maypole, the Sun would then begin its opposing, widening, quickening journey back to the Tropic of Capricorn. For the next 3 months, every day the Sun slightly widened its path and hastened its speed until the autumnal equinox, the Sun had spiraled its way from the Tropic of Cancer back to the equator. Then for the next 3 months again, every day the Sun continued to slightly widen its path and hasten its speed until the winter solstice, when the Sun made its largest, fastest circle around the Tropic of Capricorn, and the annual journey began again. The Moon had a similar yearly path revolving over and around the Earth, but unlike the Sun, which constantly changed its speed to keep a consistent 24-hour day, the Moon's speed never changed, so depending on its latitude, the Moon was observed then, as we can observe today, to take approximately 24.7 to 25 hours per cycle. This is why at different times and places during each month, we can see the Moon in the morning, afternoon, or night. This is also the origin of old fairy tales, such as The Hare and the Hedgehog, or The Tortoise and the Hare. The hare, like the Sun, begins the annual race full of energy, excitement, and ego, declaring himself the definite winner, and gets off to an immediate head start. Meanwhile, equally confident in his seemingly lesser abilities, the humble, slow, and steady Tortoise Moon begins as well, allowing the hare to lead. As the race carries on, the cocky hare tires and slows down, or takes a nap, at which point the tortoise overtakes him. This is analogous to the Moon reaching the Tropic of Cancer before the Sun each year and beginning its return journey. When the hare reaches this halfway point of the race, he realizes his lackluster attitude has resulted in being overtaken by the slower tortoise, and begins to speed up again. Then, for the remainder of the race, the Sun picks up speed day by day, gaining on the Moon, but ultimately losing as the slow and steady tortoise reaches the finish line before the hare and wins. So for ancient man, Earth and Polaris were the two immovable center points of the universe, around which the sun, moon, and other stars all revolved in a dome-like shape. Some cultures believed in a literal, physical, solid dome or firmament to which the fixed stars were bound. Other cultures mythologized the axis mundi as the world tree with Polaris at the center and all the other constellations forming the branches. In these flat Earth depictions, the North Pole occupied the center point, and south was all straight lines extending outwards from there. East and west were not straight lines, as is assumed nowadays, but were in fact circles, just like all lines of latitude and the paths of the celestial bodies. The southern circumference of Earth was surrounded by a gigantic wall of ice, 150 to 200 feet above sea level, holding the interconnected oceans in like a World Cup. Beyond the ice wall, some cultures claimed a firm barrier existed through which no human could penetrate. Other cultures believed there were entire worlds and other civilizations existing beyond the Antarctic ice. Currently, and for the past half-century, there has existed an international Antarctic treaty preventing all independent exploration of Antarctica. Pre-approved guided tours exist which take visitors to a few coastal regions of Antarctica, but no independent exploration of the continent is allowed. Sailors like Jarl Andhoy have been caught attempting to explore Antarctica and threatened, turned around at gunpoint, fined, and jailed for violating this militarily enforced international treaty. As a result, the public currently has no way to confirm or deny the seemingly fantastical claims of ancient man concerning what may or may not exist at the southernmost extremities of the Earth. We can, however, confirm that this 200-foot ice wall surrounding the southern circumference of the Earth most certainly exists. We can confirm that Polaris is indeed the only non-moving star in the sky. All the fixed stars indeed rotate perfect circles around Polaris while remaining stuck in their relative constellations night after night, year after year, century after century. The wandering stars, or planets, do indeed wander the heavens, taking their own unique spirograph-like paths when charted from a geocentric perspective. The sun and moon are indeed observably of equal size and revolve over and around us in daily cycles. Just as the ancients observed, the sun's annual path does indeed travel from the Tropic of Capricorn at the winter solstice to the equator at spring equinox, to the Tropic of Cancer at the summer solstice, back to the equator at autumnal equinox, and finally back to the Tropic of Cancer at winter solstice. The sun's light is indeed warm, golden, drying, preservative, and antiseptic, while the moon's light is indeed cold, silver, damp, putrefying, and septic. A thermometer placed in the sun's light will always read warmer than a thermometer placed in the sun's shade, while a thermometer placed in the moon's light will always read cooler than a thermometer placed in the moon's shade. Plant and animal substances exposed to sunlight quickly dry, shrink, coagulate, and lose their tendency to decompose and putrefy, whereas plant and animal substances exposed to moonlight will quickly show symptoms of putrefaction and decay. Last but not least, just as the ancients espoused, the Earth is observably motionless to all our senses, and the horizon remains perfectly flat as far as the eye can see. Not only does the horizon remain perfectly flat 360 degrees around the observer, but whether at sea level, the top of Mount Everest, 35,000 feet high in an airplane, or even at over 100,000 feet high, the highest any amateur hot air balloon has ever flown, the flat horizon actually rises to the eye level of the observer all the way up. On a globular Earth, no matter how large it is assumed to be, the horizon would remain where it was, and the rising observer would have to tilt his head downwards further and further the higher they rose to see the steadily falling horizon. Many people will be shocked to know that to this day, every single scientific experiment ever devised to show the alleged motion of the Earth has failed to do so, or, given evidence of the opposite, that the Earth is indeed motionless, and every attempt ever made to measure the alleged curvature of the Earth has failed to do so, or, given evidence of the opposite, that the Earth is indeed flat. Evidence offered for his spherical Earth theory was the Earth's round shadow cast on the Moon during lunar eclipses. To this day, heliocentrists still offer this argument as proof of a spherical Earth, claiming that during lunar eclipses, the Sun, Earth, and Moon align in a perfect 180-degree syzygy, like 3 billiard balls, causing the Sun to cast the Earth's shadow onto the Moon. This clever but faulty assumption is rendered completely invalid, however, due to the fact that lunar eclipses have happened and continue to happen regularly when both the Sun and Moon are still visible together above the horizon. As early as the time of Pliny the Elder, there are records of eclipses happening while both the Sun and Moon were visible in the sky, and continue to be recorded by the Royal Astronomical Society today. Obviously, if the Sun and Moon are both observable simultaneously during an eclipse, then they are not aligned in a 180-degree syzygy, and it is therefore impossible that the Sun could be casting Earth's shadow on the Moon, and some other explanation must be sought. Another explanation, in fact, already existed in many cultures around the world, who posited that a third celestial body known as Rahu, or the Black Sun, also existed, equal in size to the Sun and Moon. This translucent dark body passed affront the Sun and Moon during solar and lunar eclipses, causing their lights to dim.